Good morning and welcome to Bible Truth for Kids. I have a question for you this morning. If you had an emergency, if you really needed help, what number would you call? Did you say 911? That's the number that we call when we have an emergency, when we really need help. And in today's story, we are going to see a king make a 911 call. But it's not to the fire department and it's not to the police department, it's to God. All right. We know that Jeroboam has been ruling in the northern kingdom, and they call themselves Israel. And Rehoboam has been ruling in the southern kingdom, and they call themselves Judah. But you know, Rehoboam has died now, and his son Abijah has become king. Now, Abijah, he was a rotten and unacceptable king. He was not fully devoted to God. He loved worshiping false idols. He did many things that were twisted, and he only ruled for 3 years. But in those 3 years that he was in power, he was in constant conflict with Jeroboam, who was ruling in Israel. Now the time came when Jeroboam decided to come full force against Abijah. And Abijah was concerned because he knew he was outnumbered. Jeroboam had 800,000 fighting men for battle, and Abijah, well, he only had 400,000. So he needed to come up with a strategy. He knew there was no way he could win when he was outnumbered 2-1. So as the armies began assembling, Abijah placed himself on a very high place, and he shouted out 3 things to Jeroboam and his armies. And they were all true. The first thing he said was, God called me, not you, to David's throne. I mean, God had promised David that through his royal family, one day Jesus, the Messiah, would come. Abijah was part of that family. He said to Jeroboam, you're not royalty. The only reason you became king is because the people did not want my father Rehoboam for king. Then the second thing he said was, we worship the one true God, and you worship idols. Do you remember those idols that Jeroboam had made for the people of Israel? 2 golden calves. He made them so that the people of Israel would not go down into Judah and worship God at the temple. That is what Abijah was referring to. Then the third thing that Abijah said was, it's foolish to fight God. You know, this was a warning to Jeroboam. It was actually an opportunity for Jeroboam to turn to God and avoid disaster. Because to fight Judah was to fight God. God would protect Judah for David's sake. Now, Abijah has said all of these things, and they're all true. But we know that Abijah did not love God, and he was not following after God. So do you think he fooled any of the people that day? He might have, but he didn't fool God, because God knows what is really in our hearts no matter what we say. And Jeroboam, he could have cared less what Abijah said. And so the troops came against each other and they started fighting. And you know, Judah thought that Jeroboam's troops, his armies, were only in front of them. But Jeroboam had arranged an ambush from the rear. And so now Judah was completely enclosed. They were trapped. Troops before them, troops behind them. There was no way to escape. It was a desperate situation. And suddenly Abijah and the whole armies of Judah, they cried out to God. They said, help us, help us. It was a 911 call. There is nothing that we can do. Well, God heard their cry and he delivered them. He gave the victory to Judah. And that day, Judah inflicted heavy losses against Jeroboam's troops. In fact, that day, 500,000 of Jeroboam's 800,000 died in the battlefield. It was a great victory. Now, why do you think God gave Judah the victory? Was it because of all the good things that Abijah had said? Did they deserve it? No. Did he feel sorry for them? He did it because of his promise to David, and also to show that he was mighty and powerful, compassionate and merciful. You know, everyone knew on both sides, Jeroboam's side and Abijah's side, that they would not have won that battle had God not intervened. But you know, even in spite of that great victory, Abijah did not change his ways. He persisted in his rottenness. You know, when Abijah died, his son Asa became the king. And Asa was a good king. He followed God with his whole heart. He removed idols. He did what was good and right in the eyes of God. And for 10 years, they had peace with all of the nations surrounding them. Now, after the 10 years, there was a big army in Cush, and they decided to come against Judah. Now, Cush is like northern Africa. They had 300 chariots, thousands of people, and they were coming against Judah. But you know, Asa didn't panic. He just sent a powerful prayer up to God, and he said, Lord God, we are relying on you. There is no one who will rescue the powerless against the Almighty. And you know, God did rescue them. He gave them a great crushing victory against the Cushite army because Asa had trusted in God. Well, then God sent a prophet to Asa to encourage him. And the prophet said to Asa, if you follow the Lord your God, he will be with you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. He said, take courage and work hard, and your hard work will be rewarded. So Asa renewed his energies. He put an end to all the twisted things that people were still doing. He repaired the altar in front of the temple, and he even threw out the queen mother from the palace, who was actually his grandmother, because she loved idol worship. She had made herself an Asherah pole, and Asa himself cut it down, crushed it, and threw it into the river. And he gathered the whole nation together, and together they committed themselves to follow God wholeheartedly. Well, after Asa had reigned for 36 years, there was a new king now up here in Israel because Jeroboam had died, and that new king's name was Abijah. And Abijah had set up a blockade about 8 kilometers from Jerusalem, and it was preventing anybody from coming down from Israel into Judah. So Asa needed to do something about that. But you know, instead of asking God and relying on God, he went up here to the king of Syria, and he sent this king. He sent him gold and silver treasures, all from God's temple. And he said to him, listen, I know that you have an agreement with Abijah, but forget that agreement and come and help me. Come and help me defeat Abijah and to stop him from doing what he's doing. And you know, the king of Syria agreed, and together they stopped Abijah from what he was doing. You know, Abijah too was a wicked king, and I don't know why they're all so wicked. But you know, God was not pleased with what Asa had done. And so he sent another prophet to Asa, and this time the prophet strongly rebuked Asa. He said, you have been very foolish for not relying on God and going to the king of Syria for help. And as a result, you're going to have nothing but constant wars. Well, Asa was enraged that his choices were being challenged. And he took the prophet, and he had the prophet put in prison stocks, they're called. So in a prison stock, it's kind of like a body handcuff. So you're kneeling down, your neck goes through here, and your wrists go through there. It's really very awful. And on top of that, Asa inflicted many cruelties on some of his people because he just could not control his anger over this. Now, after Asa had reigned for 39 years, his feet became severely diseased. But even then, he didn't turn to God for help. He just turned to one doctor after another doctor, and none of them could help him. And then after he had reigned for 41 years, he died and he was buried. So these two kings today, one mostly good, one mostly bad, what can we learn from them? Because you know, Abijah, he was a rotten, unacceptable king. And you know, he had one great moment of faith. and God answered him. But Abijah never changed his ways. He just persisted in being rotten and unacceptable. Now Asa, he was a good king. He started out so well. But towards the end of his life, he ignored God completely. He did not rely on God. He became an angry and a bitter man, and he relied on people who failed him. So they are not good examples for us. But I found a verse in 2 Chronicles 16. And this is actually something that the prophet said to Asa. I want you to listen to it. It says this: "The eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him." So those are the kind of people that we want to be. We want to be people who are fully committed to following God, because then we can be sure that he will strengthen us and he will help us. All right. Next week, we are going to see one of the most famous prophets in the whole Bible explode onto the scene. So we'll see you then.